Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Nick Harper was packing for his trip when a drone buzzed over his property, sparking a chain of events that would unravel a web of deceit. Within days, his private land was hijacked by a rogue HOA, leading to a showdown of lies, theft, and one man's fight for justice. This is his story. I had barely started packing for my 2-week trip to Arizona when I saw it. A drone hovering above my property, buzzing like a mechanical wasp over the tree line near the east fence. At first, I figured it belonged to one of the teenagers from Aspen Falls Estates. That gated community shares a boundary with my 6-acre lot, and their kids had a history of flying things where they shouldn't. Still, the drone felt nosier than usual. It hovered, tilted side to side like it was filming, then zipped off back toward the HOA neighborhood like it had seen enough. I made a mental note to check my fence line one more time before I left. That part of the property was still rough, a little overgrown, with a field and a pond I was slowly cleaning up for a future build. I had plans to eventually design my own home out here, maybe a cabin with a wraparound deck and solar roofing. Until then, the land was just my quiet zone. No one lived on it full time, but that didn't make it public. It was mine, legally, historically, and very clearly marked on every damn county record that mattered. 3 days before my flight, I stopped by the lot to do one last walkthrough. I cleaned up the fire pit, tightened the chains on the main gate, and made sure the padlocks were secure. On the way out, I noticed a plain white envelope tucked into the mailbox. No stamp, just a folded piece of paper with my name handwritten in neat cursive. I should have known better, but I opened it anyway. We kindly request your consideration for the temporary use of your open field for the Aspen Falls Summer Festival. This would be a wonderful opportunity to build harmony across our shared community border. We hope to receive your support. That was it. No signature, no HOA letterhead, nothing official, just the kind of vaguely passive-aggressive suggestion that smelled like trouble. I laughed, shook my head, and tossed it into the glove compartment without a second thought. My land wasn't up for rent, especially not to the HOA circus next door. That night, I got an email from an old colleague who still worked in the county land office. He had no idea I was heading out of town, but thought I'd be interested in a map update they'd submitted for review. Attached was a PDF of the local zoning map. Sure enough, someone had lightly shaded my parcel in light green, marked Community Greenbelt Use. I stared at the file. Greenbelt? My land was private. Had always been. The shading must have been a mistake, right? I fired back a quick correction request through the online portal, flagged the error, and called it a day. Probably just a clerical screw-up. It happens. Still, something in the pit of my stomach didn't sit right. I told myself to let it go. I'd already arranged everything. My gear packed, house alarm set, and neighbors informed. A break was long overdue. I needed sun, silence, and a few days away from HOA nonsense. But as I boarded my flight out of Denver, I couldn't help glancing back through my messages. That drone, that map, that letter. It all felt like a prelude to something wrong. I was 3 days into my Arizona trip when I got the text. I was sipping a beer by the pool, watching the sky turn the color of rust, when my phone buzzed on the table next to me. The message was from Josh, my old high school buddy who still lived a few roads down from my property in Colorado. Dude, did you give permission for some kind of festival on your land? There's a stage going up, food trucks, like a real party. At first I laughed. Josh had a dry sense of humor and a habit of screwing with me when I was out of town. But then came the second message. No joke. There are people walking around in Aspen Falls HOA polos, big tents, grills. They're setting up porta potties at your gate. I sat up fast. The beer tipped over and soaked the towel under it. I called him immediately. He answered on the first ring. Man, I didn't want to blow up your trip, but this is nuts. I thought maybe you leased it to them or something. I didn't lease them anything, I said sharply. I'm in freaking Arizona. What do you mean there's a stage? It's literally on your field, right by the pond. They've got speakers, lighting rigs. There's a crew unloading folding chairs. I took a video. Hang on, I'll send it. 30 seconds later, the video popped up. My stomach dropped. It was my property, unmistakably mine. I recognized the tree line, the slope of the hill, the fencing I'd reinforced myself last spring. And right in the middle of it all was a full-blown setup. A portable stage, branded banners flapping in the wind, people with HOA name tags giving directions. There was even a damn bounce house inflating near my old equipment shed. I watched in stunned silence as the camera panned past my fence. It was open, or rather, it had been cut. Someone had taken bolt cutters or a grinder to the south gate and dragged it open like it belonged to them. I could barely breathe. My land wasn't just being used. It was being taken over. "Josh," I said quietly, "I need you to do something. Name it. Take as many photos and videos as you can. Get license plates, get faces, anything. I'll be on the next flight home." "You serious?" "Dead serious." I hung up, heart pounding, fingers already tapping through the airline app. I found the earliest flight back to Denver, late tonight, connecting through Vegas, and booked it. Then I called a neighbor I trusted more than anyone, Mrs. Daly, who lived across the dirt road from my property and had known my family since I was a kid. She picked up on the second ring. "Nick, I was wondering when you'd call." "You saw it?" "Of course I saw it. I was about to call the sheriff myself. There were cars parked along the ditch line. Some man in a golf cart told me they had event rights. I asked to see a permit, and he drove off like his seat was on fire. Did you get any photos?" "I got a dozen, and I printed the ones from my Ring camera." "Don't worry, honey, I've got your back." I thanked her, grabbed my bag, and called the rental company to cut my trip short. I barely remembered what I shoved into my backpack before racing to the airport. All I could see in my mind were those tents, that cut fence, the absolute audacity of it all. They were treating my land like a public park, like I didn't exist. As I waited to board, Josh sent another text, a photo this time. The banner over the stage read, "Aspen HOA Summer Celebration, Community Strong." Beneath it, in smaller font, "Hosted at the HOA Commons, adjacent to clubhouse grounds." I read it 3 times. My land, my field. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere. They were pretending it was theirs. By the time my boots hit the driveway the next evening, I already knew I wasn't prepared for what I was about to see. Nothing in Josh's videos. Nothing in Mrs. Daly's calls, and certainly nothing in that ridiculous banner could have braced me for the reality of it. My gate was gone. Not open. Gone. The padlock and chain I'd reinforced last month were lying on the ground like discarded jewelry, snipped clean through. The fence on either side had been peeled back, as if someone had decided to fold open the perimeter like a damn page in a book. My private property no trespassing sign had been knocked off the post and trampled into the dirt. As I stepped through, the damage hit me like a punch to the gut. The field was a mess. The grass, which I'd spent 2 years reseeding and grooming into something halfway respectable, was stomped into brown patches and tire ruts. Garbage was everywhere. Crushed plastic cups, empty beer cans, food wrappers, some kind of half-deflated festival balloon shaped like a flamingo. My old work shed had graffiti on one side, a spray-painted AFHOA rocks, that made my blood boil. The worst of it, though, was the pond. They'd drained it. I stood at the edge of what used to be a peaceful watering hole, something that attracted deer, birds, the occasional fox, and stared at the mud. Shallow puddles remained in patches, with toy boats and floating plastic flamingos bobbing in what little water was left. Someone had dragged a kiddie slide halfway into the muck. There were footprints everywhere, little and large, like it had been turned into a public splash pad. And on the big oak tree next to the pond, still flapping in the breeze, was one final insult, a laminated poster with the Aspen HOA logo, and a line in bold, "Thank you for joining us at the annual summer celebration. Proudly hosted on HOA Commons adjacent to the Aspen Clubhouse." Adjacent. My ass. I felt my fists clench, but I forced myself to breathe. Losing it wouldn't help. I pulled out my phone and started documenting. Photos, videos, voice memos, every scrap of damage, every inch of unauthorized setup. I even took a shot of the crushed cooler someone had left in the weeds, still half full of melted ice and rotting hot dogs. Inside the shed, things weren't better. Tools missing. 2 folding tables snapped in half. Some idiot had used my wheelbarrow as a trash can and then abandoned it in the mud. Then I saw the signs. Dozens of printed HOA flyers tacked to wooden stakes and scattered across the perimeter of the lot. They were identical, glossy, color-coded, and each one had a map of the HOA grounds with my property shaded in green, labeled Festival Grounds. They didn't just use my land, they branded it. I drove straight to the HOA clubhouse, a nauseatingly pristine 2-story building with white trim and artificial landscaping. I didn't care that it was after hours. The parking lot still had a few luxury SUVs in it, and I stormed inside like I owned the place, which, ironically, I did not. The receptionist behind the desk gave me a polite plastic smile until I told her my name. Her face dropped. "Oh, one moment," she said, ducking into a back office. Minutes later, she returned with a mane and khakis and a pastel shirt, some kind of mid-level HOA toady, who introduced himself as Trevor, Community Liaison. I didn't shake his hand. "I just got back from vacation," I said flatly. "I'd like an explanation for why my property was used for your little circus." Trevor's mouth opened, then closed. He fumbled for words. I believe we had permission. There was a rental agreement on file. Our president, Ms. Lynch, handled the arrangements." "Then I want to see that paperwork." "Now." Trevor hesitated. I think that would have to go through the board." I stepped closer. "You're telling me your HOA staged an entire festival on private land without confirming the owner?" He swallowed hard. "I'm not authorized to speak on legal matters." "Great, then get me someone who is." But he just backed away, muttering something about scheduling a meeting. I walked out with my blood boiling and the certainty growing in my gut. This wasn't a mistake. This was theft, bold-faced and dressed in party lights, and it was far from over. The next morning, I called the sheriff's department the minute the sun came up. I didn't bother with dispatch. I used the direct number and asked for Lieutenant Reyes, a man I'd worked with before during a boundary dispute a few years back. He was one of the few officials who actually understood how land ownership worked in this county. Reyes showed up by 9, dust-covered SUV idling in the dirt, his boots already creaking as he stepped out. He took one look at the trampled field and muttered, "Jesus, they really did a number on it." We walked the perimeter while I explained everything. The letter, the drone, the flyers, the banner claiming the land was HOA common ground. He took photos, made notes, asked all the right questions. When we got to the pond, he just shook his head. "You're telling me they drained this for a party?" "Looks like it," I said. "Used it as a kiddie pool." We were halfway through inspecting the vandalized shed when Reyes's radio crackled. Another unit had just arrived at the Aspen Falls clubhouse. I told him I wanted to be there when they asked for the paperwork. He didn't argue. We pulled up together 20 minutes later. The parking lot was empty except for a silver Lexus parked diagonally across 2 spaces, like it owned the place. It probably did. Inside, the same receptionist from yesterday looked like she wanted to disappear into her swivel chair when she saw me. Reyes flashed his badge and asked for the HOA president. 5 minutes later, Karen Lynch emerged. Tall, perfectly groomed, and smug in that unshakable suburban way. She gave Reyes her best concerned citizen voice. "Oh, Lieutenant, I'm so glad you came. There seems to be a misunderstanding." He cut her off. "We're here for the rental agreement. The one you claim gave you legal access to Mr. Harper's property." Karen smiled tightly. "Of course, I have it in the office." She disappeared down the hall and returned with a neatly laminated packet. Reyes took it. I leaned in over his shoulder. At the top of the document, Temporary Land Use Agreement. Below it, the name, Roy Taylor. My stomach dropped. "Roy Taylor's been dead for 4 years," I said coldly. "He was the previous owner. I inherited this land through probate. I'm the only living legal owner." Karen didn't flinch. "According to our records, Mr. Taylor granted permission before his passing." Reyes flipped through the document. "This signature, did you witness it yourself?" "Yes," she said without blinking. "Interesting," he replied, "because this notarization stamp is from a notary whose license expired 3 years ago." Karen's smile twitched. "And even if the signature were valid, which I seriously doubt, the document's not recorded anywhere with the county, so it wouldn't stand in court." I could practically hear her jaw grinding. She reached for the packet, but Reyes pulled it back. "This is now evidence," he said calmly. "You'll get a chance to explain it, just not right now." Karen tried to protest, but he ignored her, stepping aside to make a call. I followed him out. "You believe it's forged?" "I'm not a handwriting expert," he said, "but that's what court's for. In the meantime, you need to file a formal complaint. Trespassing, property damage, fraud. We'll let the DA decide how far to take it." I spent the next 3 hours at the sheriff's office giving a full statement. I handed over copies of the deed, the will, the probate documents, even Roy's death certificate. I attached the drone footage Josh had captured, Mrs. Daly's photos, the flyers I'd pulled off my trees. Everything went into the file. By the end of it, they were treating it like more than a dispute. This was now an active criminal investigation. I walked out of the station with a case number in my pocket and a fire in my chest. Someone had forged a dead man's name to steal my land for a party, and I was just getting started. By the time the weekend hit, I had a case folder so thick it looked like it belonged to a federal sting operation. But I wasn't done. If Karen and the Aspen Falls HOA thought they could explain this all away as a misunderstanding, they were about to get a hard lesson in consequences. I started digging. I went through every public HOA newsletter, social media post, event flyer, anything I could find connected to that festival. Turns out they hadn't just used my land for a party. They'd turned it into a damn profit center. According to an archived version of their HOA events page, thankfully still cached, tickets for the summer celebration were sold at $20 a pop. Children under 5 were free, of course, but everyone else? Pay to play. There was even a VIP grill zone pass for $40, which, according to the photos, was set up under a canopy about 10 feet from where my storage barn used to stand. I cross-referenced the vendor list from the flyers with county records. All of them were licensed, which meant someone had submitted the permits. That someone was, of course, Aspen Falls HOA. More specifically, Karen Lynch, who had signed off as event director. In the footer, my property was listed as Aspen Commons Field, with no indication that it was, in fact, private land. The icing on the cake. They had a PayPal link on the ticket site, registered to the HOA's general fund. Through an anonymous tip. And by anonymous, I mean Josh's cousin, who dated one of the board members. I learned the HOA netted over $16,000 in profit from that weekend. They had monetized my land, without my consent, with a forged rental agreement from a dead man. That's when I hired Laura Mendez. She wasn't cheap, but she was the best real estate litigator in the state, and she had a reputation for dismantling fraudulent HOAs like a wrecking ball in heels. Her office smelled like lavender and righteous fury. When I told her everything, she didn't blink. So they forged a signature, hosted a ticketed event, caused property damage, and pocketed the profit. I nodded. She smiled. This'll be fun. Laura moved fast. By Monday, she'd filed for an emergency motion to preserve all HOA financial records and submitted a civil complaint against both the HOA and Karen personally. Trespassing, fraud, unlawful use of private property, and, my favorite, theft by deception. But she didn't stop there. Laura submitted a request for a temporary freeze on the HOA's bank accounts, citing evidence of criminal misappropriation of funds. She contacted the local clerk to correct the shaded map that falsely included my land as Greenbelt, and she filed a public request to obtain internal HOA emails and meeting minutes for the past 3 months. That's where it got real interesting. We didn't have to wait long. A few days later, a flash drive showed up at my door. No note, no sender, just a padded envelope dropped off by hand. I plugged it into an air-gapped laptop, expecting maybe a couple of PDFs. What I got were 47 documents, including emails, calendar invites, and scanned notes, all from inside the HOA board. And right there, in black and white, was the smoking gun. An email from Karen dated 2 weeks before the festival to the rest of the board. Nick Harper hasn't been around in months. That land's been empty forever. We'll say it's HOA Commons. If he ever comes back, we've got the Taylor doc. That should shut him up. Follow-up replies ranged from cautious to complicit. One board member, Dana W., replied, "Are we sure that's okay legally? I mean, he is the owner now, right?" Karen responded, "He won't fight it. It's one weekend. We'll clean up after. And if it gets messy, it'll just be HOA versus grumpy neighbor. Nobody cares." I printed the whole chain and handed it straight to Laura. She scanned it and said, "We just crossed into criminal conspiracy between the forged document, the profits, and now documented intent. This wasn't just about trespassing anymore. This was organized, deliberate, and malicious." Karen had gambled I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't care, that no one would hold them accountable. She was about to lose on every front. If there was any part of Karen Lynch that still believed she was in control, it vanished the moment the sheriff's department executed a warrant on the Aspen Falls HOA office. It started with a midnight phone call from Laura. Her voice was sharp and electric, the kind of tone that meant something big had just broken. "We've got confirmation," she said. "Karen tried to destroy records." I sat up in bed, adrenaline crashing through the fog of sleep. "What kind of records?" "Financials, event planning logs, internal memos, HOA communications. The lot. Apparently, one of the clubhouse maintenance workers had come forward. His name was Mike, a soft-spoken guy in his 50s who'd mostly kept to himself during the festival. But after watching the circus unfold and seeing the news stories beginning to circulate, thanks to Laura feeding details to a local journalist, he decided enough was enough. According to Mike's sworn statement, Karen had shown up at the clubhouse at 3 in the morning with 2 cardboard boxes and a gallon jug of lighter fluid. She lit the fireplace in the lounge, tossed in stacks of paperwork, and started burning. He watched from the hallway, silently filming on his phone. That footage went straight to the DA's office. 2 days later, Karen was served with a subpoena and escorted from her home for questioning. It wasn't an arrest, not yet, but the temperature had changed. The community that once treated her like suburban royalty was now whispering in grocery store aisles and crossing the street when she passed. And the investigation wasn't just about her anymore. Laura and Reyes uncovered more during discovery. The HOA's financial reports were riddled with inconsistencies, payments made to vendors who didn't exist, reimbursements for equipment rentals that were actually just disguised payouts, a dozen checks signed by Karen marked as festival overhead, but cashed by her nephew's landscaping company, a company with no license and no employees. The DA's office formally opened a criminal investigation under 3 charges. 1, forgery of a legal document for signing Roy Taylor's name on the fraudulent rental agreement. 2, criminal trespass for profit, for organizing and profiting from a public event on land she didn't own. 3, obstruction of justice, for attempting to destroy evidence during an active investigation. Each one carried the potential for felony time. Meanwhile, Laura filed motions to secure every remaining HOA asset. Their bank account was frozen, their books were subpoenaed, and Karen, she'd stopped showing up to board meetings entirely. The only person who seemed to be holding on was Trevor, the same community liaison who'd fumbled his way through excuses weeks earlier. He sent me an email, almost apologetic, asking if perhaps we could settle this amicably. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to Laura, who grinned like a wolf and replied with a 1-line legal response. No settlement. See you in court. The press caught wind of the story a few days later. Local media ate it up. HOA president accused of forging dead man's signature in land festival fraud was the headline that made the evening news. They interviewed Josh. They interviewed Mrs. Daly. One reporter even tried to corner Karen outside her home, but she slammed the door before a single question could be asked. I watched the coverage from my living room, arms crossed, eyes on the screen. It felt surreal. My private field, my quiet pond, my damn wheelbarrow, all part of a criminal investigation that now had a whole town watching. The reporter closed with, officials say charges could be filed within days, pending results from the forensic handwriting analysis and financial audit. They'd already found enough to bury her, but now they were just waiting to finish the job. And me? I was just getting warmed up. I walked into the courthouse wearing jeans and a pressed flannel shirt, exactly as Laura instructed. Look like the working man who got screwed, she said. Let her show up looking like a country club dictator. I took her advice. Across the aisle, Karen sat stiff in an ivory blazer and pearls that looked like they belonged to a character in a courtroom drama who didn't realize they were the villain. The courtroom buzzed with quiet chatter. A few HOA members sat behind Karen, most of them board members, some nervously clutching notebooks, others refusing to make eye contact with me altogether. On my side, Josh, Mrs. Daly, even Mike, the maintenance guy who caught her torching the evidence. They were there, not just as witnesses, but as people who'd seen how deep this had gone. The judge, a stern woman named Callahan who looked like she'd sent entire mafias packing, entered, and we got down to business fast. This wasn't a civil matter anymore. It was a criminal trial with felony charges, forgery, criminal trespass with intent to profit, and obstruction of justice. First came the forensic evidence. The DA brought in a handwriting expert who testified that the signature on the so-called rental agreement didn't match any of Roy Taylor's legitimate documents. In fact, the signature on the fake contract had actually been lifted, traced digitally from a scanned insurance form Roy had signed over a decade ago. Then they brought out the notary records, or more accurately, the lack thereof. The stamp used on the fake contract belonged to a notary who'd been stripped of their license 3 years prior for fraudulent activity. The prosecution showed that the date of notarization didn't line up with any active credentials. In short, the document was dead on arrival. Karen's defense team tried to argue clerical error. They claimed she had been misled by someone else, that she believed the paperwork was valid, that her intentions were community-driven. They even leaned into the idea that she thought Nick Harper, me, had abandoned the property and that she acted in good faith. That unraveled quickly. The prosecution produced the internal emails, the ones where Karen told her board, in no uncertain terms, that I hadn't been around and that we could just use the Taylor dock if things got dicey. Dana W., one of her former board members, was called to the stand and confirmed under oath that Karen had insisted she had legal cover, even though several board members had raised concerns about its validity. Next came Mike's video. The courtroom went dead silent as the security footage showed Karen dumping binders into the fireplace at 3:17 a.m., glancing over her shoulder before lighting the flame. The judge didn't blink. She simply leaned forward and asked Karen directly, "Did you or did you not attempt to destroy HOA documents under subpoena?" Karen didn't answer. Her lawyer did. "Objection pending intent." It didn't help. When the prosecution finished, Laura took the floor on my behalf in the civil countersuit, laying out the monetary damage: destroyed fencing, drained pond, damaged structures, stolen tools, environmental harm, legal costs, emotional distress. She presented receipts, contractor quotes, drone footage, and even screenshots of HOA members partying like they were at Coachella on my property. She closed with, "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a hostile takeover by a board president who thought she was untouchable. Mr. Harper didn't just lose land use, he lost peace, privacy, and trust in his community." The jury didn't need long. Karen Lynch was found guilty on all 3 counts. Her sentence: 5 years in state prison, $35,000 in fines, $120,000 in civil restitution, and a 15-year ban from holding any position in an HOA or governing body. The judge also ordered asset forfeiture to cover damages, including her luxury SUV and a seized savings account tied to the fraudulent event proceeds. As she was led out of the courtroom, her expression never changed: cold, distant, like she still thought this was beneath her. But I watched the handcuffs click shut behind her back. That was the sound of justice. The courthouse steps were quiet by the time I walked out, but the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Karen Lynch was in custody. The Aspen Falls HOA was teetering like a 3-legged stool, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. But it wasn't over. Not yet. A week after the verdict, Laura and I filed a civil motion against the HOA itself, not just Karen. The board, as a legal entity, had approved the event, spent money, sold tickets, and enabled the fraud. Sure, most of them had claimed ignorance. And maybe a few genuinely didn't know the rental agreement was forged. But legally, ignorance wasn't a shield. The judge ruled in our favor. The HOA was ordered to pay damages from its own operating budget, roughly $65,000 in restitution. Their insurance refused to cover it, citing criminal misconduct from leadership. That meant special assessments were issued to all Aspen Falls homeowners to cover the penalty. And that's when the real rebellion started. The residents, already furious about the negative press, property value concerns, and the fact that the HOA had used their money to bankroll a crime, called for an emergency vote. They demanded a restructuring of the board, and within a month, every sitting member had either resigned or been voted out. But it didn't stop there. Laura, ever the tactician, helped spearhead a campaign for a temporary external administrator to oversee the HOA. A retired judge named Clarence Benton was appointed. He suspended all HOA functions pending review and declared a 90-day moratorium on enforcement actions. For the first time since its founding, Aspen Falls wasn't run by power-hungry neighbors or wine-drunk committee heads. It was under real legal supervision. During that time, a movement formed, led by a mix of longtime residents, younger homeowners, and a few folks who'd stayed silent too long. They organized a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely. It needed 60% approval. It got 74%. Aspen Falls Estates officially voted to disband their HOA. The governing structure was dismantled, remaining funds refunded, and common areas transferred to a voluntary neighborhood trust. No fines, no forced paint colors, no more entitled presidents acting like land barons. As for me, I stayed mostly quiet through it all. I had my closure, but I didn't need revenge parades. I just wanted my land back and my peace. In the spring, I finally rebuilt the fence, this time with reinforced steel posts and motion-triggered cameras. I cleared the field again, reseeded the grass, restocked the pond, and quietly replaced the old hand-painted sign at the gate. This time it read, "Private property, no trespassing, HOA activities, strictly prohibited, violators prosecuted, no frills, no threats, just a boundary, loud and clear." One day, while I was stacking firewood near the new shed, Mrs. Daly walked over with a basket of blueberry muffins and a grin. "You know," she said, "I heard Karen's old house got auctioned off last week." I nodded, saw the listing, sheriff's sale. Bank wanted out fast. She left it full of boxes and unpaid bills. Someone found a closet full of shredded HOA files. I smirked. "Let the past bury itself." She smiled. "The neighborhood's quieter now." And it was. A year after the verdict, I hosted a small barbecue for the neighbors who'd stood by me. Josh, Mrs. Daly, even Mike the maintenance guy. No DJs, no fireworks, no stage. Just good food, cold beer, and a fire pit under the stars. At one point, someone joked about how this all started with a single drone. I just laughed. It was over now. And this time, the land was exactly what it was always meant to be. Mine.